Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins.
We are the Shrink
Shrink
Think
Think Podcast,
Podcast.
baby.
Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think Podcast. We are, as always, excited, thrilled, riveted to be here with you. We love you guys. Nathan's bouncing off the walls. I'm less excited because I don't have coffee. Nathan's like really excited because he's had all of the coffee. Um, I'm at an Airbnb for spring break, and so Nathan and I are doing this virtually instead of in the same room. So it's a little bit of a different setup. But we are, as always, excited to be here. We were talking about, well, we were talking and talking and talking, and then at one point we were like, maybe we should do a podcast episode on talking too much. No, that's not really how it came about, but that is the topic for today. And I'm really curious to see where this goes because before we started recording, Nathan was asking, do we have enough material on this? And I was like, I think this is a big enough issue for a lot of people, whether it is, I think there are some people that know that they talk too much. And I think they're probably a little bit more self-aware and they might just sort of like joke about it or be like, oh, yeah, I talk a lot or whatever. But then I think there's a whole another swath of the population that you don't know you're doing this. Or you've heard it before, but you're just sort of like, yeah. I just sometimes I can talk too much. And everybody else is like rolling their eyes and sort of like closing their mouths of like sometimes. It's like all the time, bro. Uh, um, so we want to talk a bit about like why does this happen? What are some reasons for it? And then maybe some things you can do about it. Maybe we can set it up, Nathan, by just talking about what's going on when somebody is talking too much. What's happening? Obviously, they're not closing their mouths. That's what's happening. But like, what's the give us the setup like you always do.
So, in my mind, I don't, I want to clarify what it has to do because some people I feel like I'm anticipating or thinking like, oh, well, you outlaw processor people are the people who do this. Like, that might be true, but we're not talking about outloud process. We're talking about the verbal processing. We're talking about people who um kind of dominate conversation all the time and like maybe told like oh, you really love to hear yourself talk, bro, like you like it. And it could be center of attention stuff, but it's kind of a different level in the sense that and probably where my heartbeat is coming from is if people are regularly telling you that like that there's something about talking, like you're doing it too much or whatever, then there probably is something that you need to listen to in that. And it
So
and often
like people can drink too much, and then it's like, hey, dude, you have a drinking problem. But there's like a, hey, you're talking too much. You have a talking problem. Is that what we're saying? Hi,
yeah, I think
my name is Nathan, and I have a talking problem. Hi,
well
Nathan.
they should have a group. You know what happened though is only one person would talk, the dominant person would talk, and that'd be it. Nobody else would say anything. Everybody be like, bro, you're not sober right now, you need to stop talking. You have to leave the group if you're going to talk. This is all about being sober. So, how long can we all be silent? Okay, I got to get over that. Okay. So, anyway, I'm talking too much. People generally, I think, will make a comment about talking too much when the information is already out there. So, they already feel like they understand you, but you keep going. Like there's nothing else really to be said. Or and this can happen with I've got several people in the past that I've worked with that will do this. There's like just a little bit of distraction in their own mind, and they like people like for example that kind of have some, especially untreated ADHD, they just move on to the next thing and move on to the next thing and move on to the next thing. And I want to lump those people in also with this because it really is about being honest with yourself. But there is the reason why you're talking as much as you're talking is because you don't experience a lot of validation. And the irony of that is that you're not going to because because people around you they feel like they already understand, and you're not actually giving them any space to evidence that to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. To start with, that you don't believe the other people around you understand what you're saying. And so you think that you have to explain in grave detail, or what we say over explain, where you will tell like maybe most of the story or describe something, halfway or most of the way, and people get it. They're nodding their head and like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But you're also not paying attention to the cues that other people are giving you as listeners. Like, okay, you're nodding your head, like, oh yeah, I get that, or they might even make a comment like, oh yeah, I've seen that before, or like, oh yeah, I've been through that a lot of times. But you just keep on going, and it's an important. I guess what we're saying is it's not to be cruel to you; it's actually to be kind, to give you this honest feedback that maybe other people are too afraid to give you, because, of course, yeah, in the moment, it's hard to say to somebody, hey, you don't need to explain it that much. I get it already, right? It sounds like, okay, fine, you don't want to hear what I have to say. Like you can easily get defensive by that. But we're trying to convey to you that it's very likely that you have done a good job of communicating it. And if not, people will ask you like, oh, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can you explain? If they're not doing that and you're spending time explaining something, it's probably because you already have explained it well enough and the other person gets it, and you're trying, you, for whatever reason inside of yourself, you think you have to go all the way, tell like all of the details matter. And I think that's a really key part of it, is that you can easily get in the weeds of whatever it is you're saying. And people are sort of, well, I guess maybe that's another part of it too, is that you could either get too in the weeds with something and you're over explaining details that are irrelevant, right? So maybe you're like combing through all of these details and people are like, what do you, okay, so this detail and that detail and it's like, what, okay, that, what does that matter? Or maybe you're explaining something but you're explaining it in so much detail that like, okay, I already get it, I don't need all of the details. So it's a bit of like zooming out from what you're saying and like hearing yourself or reflecting on yourself. But I think that's kind of part of the problem that we're starting with here, is that you might have an issue with not being able to see yourself or hear yourself for what you're saying.
Well, and what you said earlier there, Aaron, I think is absolutely key, which is the verbal nonverbal cue. So my belief is that people that are in this situation, meaning like they are hearing somebody say, or they're hearing people joke around about how they talk too much, they think what that does mean is that these people have already given you nonverbal cues. They've already done it. It's already happened. In their mind, they have non-verbally communicated to you that they get it. And you ignored that and you kept going. Now, there's what Aaron's also talking about is kind of some of the reasons you may have ignored it. On the one
Or
hand,
maybe
you
not
may,
seen it. Maybe not.
that's, yep,
I don't want to just say that you ignored. It could be that you didn't pick up on it because you weren't watching, because you were so focused on your own story or your own self.
yeah, thank you. Because that, exactly. That I don't, when you said that, I'm like, that's true. I don't mean it quite like I'm just not, it doesn't have to be that intentional. So, and that's kind of also why we're bringing this up, because one of the reasons, I guess, one of the reasons I'm using that word though, like ignored, is because there's probably a part of you that feels that like this person's given you this nonverbal cue of I get you, bro, and right in that flash you were like, no, you don't, no, you don't. You're like, because I haven't told you, I don't, you don't feel like the other person actually understands, and you feel like you understand what what they are saying they understand, and you disagree and you realize you need to reframe it. So, and that's all happening so fast. But what's happening, this is why there's kind of a plea, like if somebody said, hey, you should listen to this podcast episode, um that if you are getting the verbal cues, then that kind of means one of two things, that in your own process when you're trying to, like as Aaron was suggesting, possibly over explain, and you're maybe not trusting that they actually understand, they still feel like they understand. And now they are saying you talk too much. So what we're saying is take a step back and let's try to navigate this differently when you're talking with people, because if you are actually ignoring what's going on, then you're going to need to start maybe bringing up some distrust of yourself, that maybe you actually are talking about like more, you're effectively communicating more than you think, or you have to one there's a few options. I don't know if we want to get into those right now, but because I'm thinking of solutions, and I don't know if we want to talk more about this, like Aaron, you have a response.
Yeah,
um
yeah. We'll unpack the problem just a little bit more.
okay,
Keep going.
so the other side of the problem is if you have people that like you're listening to your own self more than you're like actually watching them talk, like, or watching or being with them and present is what I guess I mean. Like you are just not really paying attention to where your words are going. Like you're just not. I mean, you could be like it could be an out loud process thing that you start off with and you're just kind of thinking and whatever, and you don't necessarily expect the other person to be tracking everything. So you might be like, well, I'm sorry. I mean, that's just kind of how I think. Well, okay, but you would probably need to frame that for people so they know that they are not paying attention to this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think this is a really important piece of it too, because what I hear you saying within that I think our listeners need to understand is that you might be in your own head, in your own thoughts, almost like in your own world. And I would put it this way, it's inconsiderate, or it could be insensitive or disrespectful to the person around you, or to, I should say, to the people around you. I'm trying to be just kind of general and global here, right? It can be disrespectful to the people around you because if you, it's kind of like if you're in a lecture, you're listening to someone speak, and there's a certain time that this is supposed to go, and they don't stop and ask for questions at the end, or they go over time. It's like, come on, we gave you an hour for this, and you're going over time. You're not thinking about your audience and what they need from this. So if you're in your own head talking about that, it's like you're not considering the perspective of your listener, which this is really important. I'm not saying that you can't focus on yourself. What I'm saying is the point of a conversation is for it to be two-way, right? It's like there's a speaker and then there's a listener, and there's the effectiveness of the communication. If you're not considering the other person, if you're not using some self-awareness and considering their perspective and what they need in order to receive your message, then you're putting all of the responsibility on them to understand. And you're not taking it on yourself and saying, wait a minute, I need to give you some context for what I'm saying. Or I need to check with you to make sure throughout some of this process, are you understanding what I'm saying? And if you are, then I can adjust accordingly. If not, I'm just saying like I'm going to just communicate my own way, however I think fits, but you're not using that feedback loop with the other person or the other people around you to modify your communication so that you're sort of in rhythm or in sync together. And that's an important part of communication in relationship.
I think along the side of all that, like we're kind of going through like how this happens. The other thing is you might not really be used to like the amount of attention you're getting when you're getting it. So like you start to talk with people, you're excited to be around them, you want to share a bunch of things. And as this person's listening to you, some people are listening, you're like, awesome. You know what? I got to tell you all this stuff now. Like, if I don't tell you, like, this is my opportunity, and
It's like the
so,
dog that when you come home, it like jumps up on you like over and over and over. And it's like, okay, okay, I get it. And it's like, it's cute at first, and then it's like, okay, down boy.
yeah, yeah. And
Or
I,
like,
I
let me
mean,
walk through the door. Let me get in the door and get settled before you like jump all over me.
but I have everything to share. Well, and, and with that, like, oftentimes there's a lot of subject jumping. So like, and people have like this idea when you're over communicating or you're quote unquote talking too much and or talking to hear yourself talk, because as Aaron was just sharing a few moments ago, it's like, you know your audience. I mean, if you want your audience to hear what you're saying, you're and why you are saying it, you have to slow down, or else they don't know why you're talking. Like, like they're like, okay, all these things stream together. I have no idea where you're going. So I will wait, I guess. I will wait here and then maybe get some context clues as you're talking, type of a thing. So I've done that to Aaron before, by the way. He goes like, I don't know what you're talking about, like at all. And that I feel like is not me talking to talk. It's more like it's a similar thing I think that happens with trying to process your thoughts out loud. So
Yeah,
in light of
and I
that,
know, and other people too that will say, will kind of like they'll be in their thoughts, and you've done this a time or two as well, I would say, where you're and I know I've done this too, where you'll be in your thoughts and uh you will start almost like mid thought or mid in the middle of it. Like if you imagine a story and you're like, and can you believe? And then he wouldn't give he wouldn't give it to her. He just took it and wouldn't give it back. And you're like, who is he and what did he take? What are you even talking about? And you're like, oh, the detective with the suspect or whatever. And it's like, oh, yeah, you didn't say any of that. Like you just said he and her, like out of nowhere. You're like, hey, Nathan, he and her, and they did this thing. And you're like, I don't what give me some context or what are we talking about here? Right? Like you got to consider the other person that they don't know what's in your brain and they need some context for that. But then on the other side, what we're saying is if you're talking too much, they don't need to know every single thing that's in your brain because you can give them enough and they're like, okay, yeah, I understand. Um, so maybe we can kind of move to the solution side of it. I would say kind of one of the first thing is I think it's a great idea always to ask people around you, especially those who are close to you, the people that you are communicating with the most. Hey, how well would you say I communicate? Or what do you think is the thing that I struggle with the most in communication, or the thing that I don't do the best in communication? Get some direct feedback from people and ask them like, hey, go easy on me, or can you politely share what your experience of me is in conversation? Like, how am I communicating? Hear from people that care about you and want to that have heard you and been around you enough to know, and then receive that feedback and don't give any responses. Just say, be quiet. This is going to challenge you. Just be quiet, listen to it, and then at the end of it, just say, thank you for sharing that. I'll work on it. And then talk to somebody, talk to process it. Don't have a reaction in the moment, but let your emotions sort of settle down. I think that's a great starting point because you can get some great data about yourself. I think another thing that you can do is to slow things down. Oftentimes, I think people are communicating way too quickly. Their thoughts are moving really quickly. Either they're bouncing around or they're trying to get through something quickly. And when your mind is quick, your mouth can't move as fast because your mind can think all kinds of things, but your mouth is kind of limited by time. You can only say a certain amount of words at the same time, unless you're like me, where sometimes you try to say two things at the same time, where it's like, what is it? Have you're like, thanks you too, and you're like, think too, and you're like, what? Think too? That's not even you smashed it together, it's like one of those things. It's because your mouth, the words are limited by space and time, but your mind can just go all over the place. But if you can slow that down, and it might mean like calming yourself, it might be a little bit of like anxiety, or you might need to breathe a little bit and like give yourself a little bit of space to like, okay, I've got time here. I don't need to like get this all out in the first like 11 seconds of our conversation. Like if you can slow it down and communicate a little bit more clearly, you can think about or have space to think about the context of the other person.
yeah, I think the other thing you need to look at is your own belief. What you are believing, if you are an over explainer, is that either you're not explaining things the right way or they actually don't understand your explanation. And if they are telling you that you talk too much or whatever, then maybe it's safe to assume they feel like they understand your explanation. So that would mean you would have to reconsider what you're actually saying. And that also means you have to understand, you have to reconsider, if they do understand that, then you need to figure out what they understand. So you've got to give them space to do that. You would have to stop and say, and like Aaron is saying, if this usually, well, family members would probably agree on the outside, right? So if you have a family that's kind of given you this feedback, if you went to them and said, a lot of times I feel like I keep talking because I need to explain to you guys because I feel like you don't really pay attention. Um, but like, so can you tell me like at what point in general, like that you feel like you understand? Meaning like later when we're in a conversation, I want to invite you to tell me when you feel like you actually understand what I'm saying. Just know that if you say that to me, then I'm going to say, can you tell me what you understand so far? So at least then I know like where things are at, like that type of thing. So
There's a
it's
little
just
bit like this feedback loop that's happened here. It's like a loop. Do you understand? Okay, continue. Loop. Do you understand? Okay, continue. That sort of a thing.
yeah. And so it'll also help you to realize that you can probably drop some things, meaning like you probably can back off of some of the stuff you've said. And and not only that, but when they do communicate back, you could also realize, okay, I can see how they understand that, but that's not even really my focus. So, and it can help you hone what actually your focus is. Just realize that you want to actually get feedback if you want an audience. If you do not want feedback, then you don't need an audience.
Which means
Like,
you don't need people to listen to you. You might as well like sit in a room and talk to the mirror, in the bathroom and just talk to yourself or hit voice record and record yourself talking. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying because and this is going to be this part's going to feel a little bit harsh, but it's true. It's honest right here that if you're not interested in hearing what other people have to say and incorporating that or hearing their feedback, then you really need to look at yourself in relationships and you might need to consider if you are eating up too much of the space in the relationship. Like it's more about you than it should be. If because you a relationship should be mutual. You really need to invite other people in order for them to have um, interest and a stake in the claim, to have motivation to be a part of, really even to sit and listen. They need to know that what they're doing is making a difference or that they are valued also. So if you don't really want to hear their feedback, then I think you really need to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because talking too
but
much is bad for your health.
there you go. And we don't want to do that. We got to head for home here. Actually, in my awesome administrative abilities, set a stopwatch over here, Aaron. Can you believe it?
Wow, what
Actually,
are we at?
actually, 23.
Boom.
Yeah, so we hope this has been helpful and that we haven't talked too much over and
We
over.
haven't over explained the issue and what to do about it.
But know your audience, trust your audience, and accept your audience's feedback and see if you can navigate that a little more efficiently, my friend, and finally be heard.
Have a great
Have a
day.
great day.